We have another classified communication meeting in 2 weeks. I know. I don't know what happened. So we can meet, or we can cancel and just do the first meeting in March. And I could send you out any pressing issues that come up in the meantime. So let's just vote really quickly. How many would like to cancel and postpone till March? And how many would like to meet both times? Oh, yeah. The licensed are meeting, yeah, they are, and theirs just felt like theirs was almost 3 weeks ago now. So we got off sync with them. So what I'll do with the licensed is anything that comes up that can't wait until the March meeting, I will make sure you get notes and information on. And you can also watch the video. Yep. Oh yeah, that's right.
Everything that I send out normally, I can just send that out to
Perfect.
also.
Okay.
For the February meeting that's coming up for license.
So Christy's going to send everything out from the license to you. I will have her ask me, is there anything particular you want to be sure classified pay attention to? And I'll tell her that, and she'll put that in a personalized email for you with the same information. Okay, and then just a quick thing about the legislative, upcoming legislative session. So we are in a first year of biennium planning, which means if you've been around for a while, we will have really no good idea of what the actual revenue for next year will be until late in the season. Often, 9 times out of 10, when I've had adopted budgets, we've actually adopted our budget before we officially knew what monies we would get from the legislature. So that makes this year and planning for next year all kinds of messy, and that's normal. So when people get worried about things, you just need to say this is part of it. There's going to be lots of talk about funding and full funding for public education. The governor's budget that came out the beginning of December added actually $2 billion to the state school fund. That is the best governor's budget we have ever had since I have been probably an educator, but at least since I've been a superintendent. So we're starting in a really good position with a legislature or a governor who really values public education at a cost of $2 billion additional dollars into the state school fund. What you'll hear, though, is that districts throughout the state are in all different kinds of places. Some will still say this is not enough money and we're going to have to cut. A couple of our districts to the north are already talking about cutting $10 million, $15 million in some large districts to the north of us. What I know that means for us is that we're kind of in this status quo mode, which means for the most part we can roll everything up into next year as we exist now. So what I would say if people start worrying about funding, because again, if districts like Beaverton are cutting, there'll be all sorts of publicity over that. And just say, from what I've heard, we're not in a cutting mode. The superintendent will let us know if that changes. So until something changes, we're going to assume we will get at least at the governor's budget, and that will be, not enough, but at least we won't be in the cutting mode. So that's where we are as we're planning for the budget. The other thing that is going to happen is there's going to be lots of talk about what's called a school improvement fund, that we're going to get additional revenue for in a school improvement fund. And if that revenue comes to us in a school improvement fund, we'll have limited choices about how we can spend it. So there'll probably be 3 or 4 buckets of ways you can spend the money. Lowering class size, extending your school year, extended learning time for kids. There'll kind of be a list of some things. And what I'm going to try to do at the next classified meeting is to really, before then, understand what those buckets might look like, and that we could spend some time understanding what those dollars might mean and what it might be spent on. So that's my goal in the next month, is to really get a good handle on that, because we will be asked if Salem-Keizer got $6 million more in a school improvement fund, how would you spend it? So we will go through an exercise like that, even though there's no guarantees that that money will come to us. So if we'll just I'll try to be really clear about it so that when you go back to your buildings, you can say, nope, this is a exercise if the legislature allocates more money. But in the meantime, we're not in a cutting mode. So, and if you've been here for a while, doesn't that feel good to not be in a cutting mode? Don't hesitate to ask. If you hear something, you have people get worried about something, shoot us an email and we'll respond with what we know at the time. But we just know it's an evolving process. The first message of the budget for next year will be at the end of April. I think it's April 24th that I present my budget to our budget committee, and that's always on CCTV, and I'll remind you of all that as we get closer. Okay, Brett, you're going to talk about first consideration process as it applies to classified, and that would not be what you'd want to call it, huh?
I think that works. We can talk about that.
Okay, transfer processes, right?
Sounds good.
Okay, Brett.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brett Cheever. I am a director of staffing for our district's human resources department, and I'm here to talk about kind of some information on hiring timelines and what our transfer process will look like for 1920 for the upcoming academic year. The reason I wanted to chat with you today, because it feels a little bit strange to do it this early, right, is because we'll be sending out an email on February 1st for your licensed peers, for the teaching counterparts, and I wanted to give you a heads up ahead of time about what that is and what it also means for you as well. The reason we send an email in February is because we have arrangements with our counterparts that work for universities or university partners to help meet with their upcoming graduates at their educator fairs that they do in winter and spring, and those tend to start about this time of year. So on February 1st, we'll be telling our licensed staff in the district, hey, we're going to be having those meetings, but we would like to know before we do that where they are interested in potentially transferring to for the upcoming academic year, because we want to find out for our existing staff where they'd like to be before we start to reach out to external staff. So that goes out on February 1st. Classified positions are a little bit different in their timeline. Part of the reason for that is actually, as the superintendent was just talking about, we're still in the middle of planning the budget for the 2019-20 upcoming year. We do have some general ideas, though, that we'll be able to roll forward, as she mentioned. And so hopefully mid-February to early March, we'll be able to start reaching out with some information asking for classified staff. Where might you be interested in transferring to if you're a school-based staff member for the upcoming year? We will post that online. We will send out an email. Tentatively, as I said, we'll be looking kind of at that mid-February to early March timeline. That could shift. We do need to have a little bit more budget information before we do that. We don't want to get anyone's hopes up for a particular location or position until we know for sure that it'll be a position that we have in the budget. But we will send that out as soon as we have it. And if that timeline changes, we'll communicate that as well. Just like every year and throughout the year, by all means, also, if there's a position that you see that's open, you're more than welcome to apply for it. And every position you apply to, you have first consideration rights, that ability to be considered before an external candidate. Questions at all on that? Okay, so when that email goes out on February 1st, that one's license specific. There'll be a follow-up that'll be the classified positions that'll come out also. Please.
Works with the boundary changes and, you know, if we lose the amount of students that it's expected that maybe my school will lose, then that means probably less FTE and all of that. So is that going to be considered yet at this time, or is that a later once are you following?
Absolutely. So the question had to do with how the boundary change process might impact what positions are available, and then in turn how you get to apply for positions and what's out there as well. You're absolutely right. It's possible that boundary changes could impact either how many positions or which positions are at certain schools. That's something that the initial proposal has gone to the school board. They'll be considering that over the coming month. We wouldn't be able to place someone in a new assignment until we know that those have been approved. We will, as we get closer to the end of February and into March, we'll probably have some good ideas about what we think we might have available. And so when we reach out for, are you interested in transferring, that's what we would base that on. And before we finalized any of those decisions, we'd make sure that we had the boundary changes in place. With boundary changes, you know, if you saw a decrease in enrollment in a school, we would wonder whether or not that would have impact in FTE at a particular school. But also some of the FTE in our schools is based on particular programs or services or supports that we provide. And so sometimes those aren't quite as tied to FTE as you would think. So it really is specific to what type of position it is. as well. Did you want to add to that at all?
I was going to go on to boundaries.
Oh, it is a beautiful segue, so she was ready for that too. Before I say goodbye, any other questions about that transfer piece? By all means, and let me hand it back.
All right, so I'm going to take boundaries here, and Karma, if there's something I need to add at the end, you listen for that, okay? And because she's the one that was like, here's what we need to be sure to say. So I'm going to start with kind of the answer to that. So even though the board is not taking action until February 12th, we are doing internal work to understand what does that mean for how many students are going to transfer. And right now we're also looking at that continuity exception, so some kids get to stay. And so we're prepared that right after February 12th, we are going to start engaging our families to find out who's staying, who's going to go to their new school. This Thursday, and there may be even an office manager or two that have been invited, we've invited our principals who will be affected by boundary changes to sit with us and help us write out that communication to parents, because it's going to be really important that we get clear communication and they know what they have to do and what they don't have to do if they want to stay. So if you think about it, the way it's been presented to the board at this point, if you are at your current high school right now, freshmen through, seniors will be gone and graduated, freshman through junior, the way we are thinking about it this moment, unless it changes with the board, is that they'll stay at their current high school. And incoming ninth graders go to their new high school. And so we can predict pretty closely what the transfer will be because we're also going to transport. So if they are staying or going, we're going to provide transportation, the way the package is presented to the board now. If they are in middle school currently, that means 8th graders don't count. They're going on to their new high school if they have a boundary change. Middle schoolers right now will also stay in their middle school and be transported. And then we are gradually going, so new sixth graders go to their new school. And then we'll also have continuity exemptions for next year's 4th and 5th graders. So it'll be a slow rolling boundary process because we have schools that are under construction. So North Salem, for example, is going to be under construction next year. We won't have our classified meetings here. We're set to get about 400 new students next year. They won't have the capacity yet. So by just having incoming 9th graders go to their new school, it puts north about 100 to 150. So the FTE shifts won't be as dramatic in that way, but because we are taking care of as much of this as we can in February, even though we're going to start some of our processes, by the beginning of March, we should have a really good sense of any FTE shifts at the same time. So we're about a month out, maybe 6 weeks. Does that help?
That helps a lot. And then you said transportation with a consideration high school, middle, but not elementary further.
For continuation, I think continuation would also be at elementary as well. Yes.
The transfer. Oh,
Yep. But only for kids. We're still trying to get other kids that aren't part of the continuity to go to their new school. Yeah, and we knew it's really important. We knew a continuity exemption for a kid is not a continuity exemption if your parents don't have transportation. And we heard that loud and clear in our listening sessions. But again, it's going to be contingent on the board approving that. They're also going to have to approve some buses and things in order to make that happen. But it will be the right decision for kids if we can have all of that line up. And this would not be something great to be try to communicate out past the district. Let us really work hard on our internal communication, and that way we can really, when we speak directly to parents, have everyone internally in the know and communicating about it so that parents get the right information. Okay? Karma, what did I miss? Okay, awesome. Okay, thanks, Karma. All right, Jim Orth. I know. And I'm rushing us through because we actually have an activity for you today. Aren't you excited about that? Want me to?
Yeah, well, if we could disseminate these.
Here, you speak, and
Okay.
I can.
All right. So hello, good afternoon. I haven't spoken in front of this group before. I'm Jim Orth, the interim assistant superintendent. So we've had our calendar committee that has worked for, well, really since last October on developing and bringing up different ideas for possibilities for adjusting the calendar. And there were several different points of emphasis that the committee really wanted to focus on. And in the end, as a cabinet group, we decided that changing the calendar wasn't necessarily the answer to the issues that were brought up. And so even though we weren't really able to answer all of the issues, we are able to start responding to some of those issues that were brought up from that committee. The calendar that you're looking at is basically a mirror of this year's traditional calendar. And so you're going to see that it's almost identical to this year's calendar. But we've already been looking at a few items to help make some changes. And I want to make sure that you hear what those three initial things that we're going to be addressing. The first thing is timeliness and quality of communications with parents around their students' achievement and academic progress. And so we've had this, especially at the secondary level, especially at the high school level. We're not great at getting parents in for parent conferences, and we're not great at necessarily communicating when those students really need supports. And so we're actually asking our high school principals, or we will be asking our high school principals to make a plan about how they're going to engage parents differently for those students who are needing more supports. That doesn't mean that we're not going to contact parents when students are doing well. It just means we're going to engage differently, and that might look differently at every high school because there might be different communities and different needs there. Another issue that was brought up was around food insecurities. When we have long breaks, some of our families and our students have a hard time accessing foods, and so we felt like we could try to move those conferences away from different weeks of break, or we can also look at different ways to address it. And so for this spring, as a matter of fact, we've already made a change. We contacted food services, and we had planned to have several locations during spring break where we would have our food services available like we do in the summertime. Not as many as in the summer, but several locations. And we were actually able to extend those to the Thursday and Friday of conferences this coming spring. And we'll look at like next Thanksgiving, and if we can do that leading up to conferences that time, during that part of the calendar, we'll do so. And if not, then we'll work with some of our community organizations to organize some serving of food and or organizing some food pantries. And then the third thing was really around getting more stakeholder input. The cabinet really felt like we needed more data. Do we feel like we can address the issues that were brought up by calendaring them, or can we do other things to address those issues? And so we'll be engaging with some of our students and some of our staff in different ways to gather more information about that. Any questions?
I know. Why does it say draft on it?
Because we have finalized it and sent it to the associations today, and we have a 2-week window where we have to allow time for feedback and input. But so 2 weeks from today, most likely this will be approved and adopted. Good question, Christy.
Any other questions? I think this was talking to the mic.
Oh.
I think this was, you were really ready to see this, right? Yes, you've been getting asked a lot. Okay, so okay to share it internally as a draft. I'm sure associations will share it. We had a kind of a good mix of people at the table at the calendar committee, so we have gotten feedback along the way, but we do have this 2-week window that we give another opportunity for feedback. So yes.
Posted out there, we can see it.
Not yet because of that 2-week window. So as soon as it's posted, it will come forward in a story, and it will be on the website and everything.
Delivered to the presidents of the association, so it's available from them.
Yes, it is electronically available from your association presidents. And did we get it out to principals as well? So principals also have an electronic version of it. Yep. Other questions? All right. So what we're going to do next is an activity around some district-wide planning. So in history, there's always been a school improvement process for districts to engage in, also for schools to engage in. Raise your hand if you've engaged in a school-wide planning process where you had to answer a bunch of questions and things. So some of you have within, especially our title schools. This year, we're kind of back in that planning phase again, and there's a framework that ODE has put out that they are asking districts across the state to look at several indicators and do some assessments about where we are. So we have taken the I don't think there's 97, but we've taken the 97 indicators and we've shrunk it. No, there's not really 97, but we've shrunk it down to a few that we think would be good for you to engage with us on and to give your input to. What we've done is we are doing this with all of our leadership, licensed communication groups, classified communication groups, some other focus groups out there, our PACE group, and we're going through the same set of questions and then we're getting some themes. And then what will happen from there is we'll take some priority indicators and help impact our strategic planning. So that's what we're going to do next. We have a number of facilitators. And how many groups do we have? So we're going to have to get in 5 groups. So I'm going to say this is 1. This is 2, this is 3, 4 to about there, and then the last section, 5, will be up here. And you're going to have a facilitator, and they're just going to go through and take notes as you are, they're asking you questions. They're also getting individual feedback from you. So you're going to do some writing too so that we're sure we have every single person's thoughts as we collect this into themes. So since you're here, we're going to use you in this way. So we got it? You guys know where you're going? Okay. When you're